Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Callan Shabella. I'm the CEO of Inference Solutions. And the webinar today is Inference Studio as a technology hub. Now, the participants in the webinar today, I've just had a look through the list, and they're pretty much all from BroadSoft-based service providers. So I'm going to tailor the presentation to reflect that and talk a lot about the BroadSoft integration points, and in particular some of the challenges that you might have addressing the needs of your customers as a modern day service provider. Okay, so most of you on the call are probably quite familiar with Inference Studio, but there are a few people that have either, as a service provider, just started using the product or just started reselling the product. So just as a quick overview, Inference Studio, what is it? Essentially, it's a complete service creation environment for complex IVR. Okay, so any sort of IVR requirement, any sort of complex call handling requirement. And importantly, it's built as an abstraction layer on top of the BroadWorks media server. So the BroadWorks platform has a media server which has a voice XML and CC XML interpreter built into it. And the Inference Studio platform sits on top of that and allows you to do lots of really interesting things with that BroadSoft media server. Firstly, it's completely configurable via a standard web browser, so it's usable by non-technical users, usable by enterprise customers, and so forth. And we'll jump out to the interface and show that as we go through the webinar today. There's full support for templated applications, and we'll show some templated applications today. There are literally dozens and dozens of them available to any account holder that gets an account with Studio. Full support for both inbound and outbound IVR. There's an integrated dialer that's built on top of the media server. Speech recognition, text-to-speech, voice biometrics, all of these technologies are now fully integrated into Studio and easy to use. Full support for XSI, so that's the extended services interface on BroadWorks, and there's a lot of things you can do in Studio relating to XSI, and also a lot of things you can do using our new React platform, which is going to be integrated with Studio in the not too distant future, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. For those selling the BroadWorks call center, it's fully integrated with the BroadWorks thin client, so you can do agent desktop screen pop, for example. CRM integration, of course, report builder, and a lot more. Now, this isn't a session on Studio capabilities, more on what you can do with Studio in terms of trying new technologies and new services as they become available. So there are other webinars that talk through the feature set of Studio, and please refer to those if you want more detail on Studio. Basically, where the BroadWorks auto attendant stops, which is the inbuilt BroadWorks IVR, that's where Studio starts. Okay. All right, so it's also worth talking about how Studio is really designed from the ground up for service providers and carriers. There's true multi-tenancy, so you can have a super user level login, you can have a service provider level login where you're managing customers. You can have an enterprise login, which is what your customers would use. The supervisor mode is really important. It allows you to see what your customers are doing. It helps you troubleshoot their scripts and so on if that's a service that you want to offer. It also allows Inference to help in that process as well if you want to make use of Inference professional services to do that. What we're going to be focusing on today is as a technology hub. So basically allowing service providers access to the latest cloud technologies without having to make any changes to their core network. In the latest version of Studio, we've also added a lot of API services for service providers to use, both in terms of billing as well as provisioning and IVR management. Okay, so today we're focusing here on this technology hub. How do you try new technologies as they become available in the marketplace? How do you try them and let your customers try them on your core network without having to do any changes? So just as a bit of a reference architecture, this is a typical implementation. So you've got here on the left-hand side, you've got your typical Broadworks-based service provider. So you've got your Broadworks infrastructure, your application servers, your network servers, and so on. You'll have your own media servers, most likely. And then you've basically got your access network where customers are connecting into you via SIP trunks that you're providing, or their hosted users, or whatever. And what you have done if you are reselling Studio is that you've actually extended your network to the Inference points of presence. So we have 2 points of presence in North America, we have 2 in Australia, and we're currently in the process of building 2 in Europe. And this is where you will extend your network to in order to allow calls to terminate on the Inference platform. Okay, so within that Inference point of presence, obviously we have all of the necessary Broadworks media servers that you would need to have otherwise in your network. We have all of the resource servers, so these are all of the technologies that we're talking about here as an integration hub. So this is things like speech recognition, often referred to as automatic speech recognition, text-to-speech, TTS, biometrics. But what we're doing more recently is also adding in lots of third-party cloud technologies, and we're basically integrating these directly into our application servers so that our customers can get access to those technologies. So what do we mean by a technology hub? So effectively an aggregation point where different vendors come together under a common framework. And in Studio, this common framework is typically in the form of a Studio node. I'll just switch out in a second and show you what I mean by a Studio node, but there are more than 30 different types of Studio node that you can use today, and there's more and more being released with each version of Studio. So just to show you with an example, if I just switch screens here, I've actually logged into Studio here as a service provider, and I'm just going to click on the Studio link and assume the supervisor mode and go into a particular account. So in this case, I've got a demonstration account here. And if I wanted to pick a particular application, so let's look at this password reset demonstrator. Firstly, you'll notice that it displays graphically on the screen, so there it is there. And if I want to click on this box here, we call that a node, and if I want to edit that, I can change this to any one of the different types of node, more than 30 types of node available, and I can just use those within my script. Now, you might not see 30 types of node within your account, and that's because we also allow the idea of business classes where you can determine which sort of technologies you want to make available to your customers and which you don't. And so the nodes will switch on and off dependent on the business class that you have defined with Inference. So you can have multiple business classes for different types of customer segments, for example. So yeah, if I wanted to change the node here, I could just simply click on that and it would modify to that node type. Okay. All right. So Inference basically only works with carriers. So we understand that many service providers engaging with new vendors out of the market can be problematic. A lot of these cloud technologies are relatively new, and in some cases you're not sure how long they're going to be around, you're not sure about the quality of the services, you're not sure whether the feature set roadmap is going to map what you want to use. And so accessing new technologies through Studio can be a much easier alternative for a lot of service providers, and it can also be a lot faster. The when you look at, say, a typical carrier roadmap, some of the challenges that you have today are around how do you tackle these sort of threats that are coming from outside of the typical carrier-to-carrier competition. Okay, so we look at how do we make our service providers stay relevant and stay valuable. Now, a big change out there, or a big threat out there, is over-the-top plays or unified communications as a service plays. You would have seen a lot of press around the likes of companies like Twilio, which are essentially disintermediating the carrier, basically saying, yes, you can use them for sort of an IP service, but all the telco will handle all of that. That's really quite a big threat to carriers, and in fact, some carriers have gone to the extent of acquiring UCaaS platforms to extend their platform to support those sort of functionality. But the challenge here is to be value-adding and be more than just a pipe. So how do you do that? Well, you do that by offering really compelling services on the end of your network. Okay. The problem though is that adding features is really hard when you're at scale. So if you're a tier 1 or a tier 2 carrier and you've got tens or hundreds of thousands of different customers, you've effectively got millions of end customer requirements that you need to be mindful of when you upgrade, modify your core network. Okay. Furthermore, you see a lot of talk about cloud migration, and the reality is, as all carriers know, is that one person's cloud is just another person's data center. So with Inference, we really want to make sure that the cloud exists somewhere, but that somewhere is on your network, that you are the cloud provider for all of your customers, and it's not an over-the-top play that is essentially just using you as IP transport or transit. So Inference only sells through carriers, and we are also mindful that your core network, because it is so big, may be updated very, very infrequently. In fact, for many carriers, a rolling out of a new Broadworks release could easily be a year project or longer. You might not be able to get to every Broadworks release because of the time it takes to test them, to migrate customers to them, and so on. Inference Studio, on the other hand, has many updates every year. So if we look at this year alone, we had version 3.9 come out, version 4, and version 4.1, all released in 2016. In fact, version 4.2 almost made it into 2016, but will now be released in January. So because there are so many releases, and because all of these releases add new features, and because we support business classes, which means you can determine if you want to use these features or not, it's completely up to you, but you can use them without any change to your underlying core network, we are always keen to know what carriers would like to see. What types of technologies would you like to try with your customers, or what type of technology are your customers asking you for, and see whether we can add those into the next Studio release or into a future Studio release. We also operate a fast feature program, so if you have a pressing customer requirement, you can essentially leapfrog any queue and make sure that those requirements are in the next Studio release. So if we look at 2016 as an example, we added voice biometrics, so the ability to determine who a caller is based on matching their voice to their voice print. PCI compliance, level 1, and this is global compliance. So this means that you can basically provide your customers with PCI level 1 compliant payment services on the network that you already offer. Many more Studio templates, we'll show some of those in a minute. A lot more in the form of integration options, allowing you support for OAuth, OAuth 2, and those sorts of things. A fully redesigned dialer, so it's much more sophisticated now. It supports different retry rules and so on. Support for Cisco Spark. This was a customer request, and we added it into the product roadmap. So Cisco Spark is a group chat and chat environment where you can basically have rooms, and you can either post messages to rooms, people can subscribe to rooms, and you could read messages from rooms. So we allow that to be integrated in Studio, so a Studio IVR can post messages into a Cisco Spark room, and vice versa, it can read messages from a Cisco Spark room and make them available within an IVR, so within a telephone call. A workflow designer, a lot more coming on this in 2017. Inference React, which is a really big feature, or it's effectively a new product for Inference. It's now in its beta release, so if you would like to be a beta customer of Inference React, let us know. It's freely available to our existing customer base. Essentially what it is a very large-scale XSI subscription, filtering, and reaction framework, so that you can use XSI events and XSI actions to do really interesting things on your network. It's sort of a CTI intelligence layer on top of Broadworks. Really exciting about where that product is heading. Improved API support and lots of other features, all without any downtime to our customers or any incremental cost to them. Okay, and that's just 2016. Going back to the concept of Inference as a technology hub, what I've done on this slide here is actually shown on the right-hand side. I've shown the various nodes within Studio, and then on the left-hand side, I've shown you what technologies are actually making those nodes possible. So if you look at a form node where you can capture spoken input, or a play prompt node where you can play and prompt out to the caller over the phone, what's powering those nodes is either a nuance engine, whether it be a speech recognition engine or a text-to-speech engine, a LumenVox engine, whether it be a speech engine or a text-to-speech engine, and you have the capability to basically switch between different types of engines and different types of voices as it suits your customer base. So historically, you would have to go out and you would have to have a project and spend CapEx and host these licenses on servers within your network, and now we do all of that for you and basically lease it back to you as part of your Studio license fee. Broadworks Screen Pop Transfer makes use of the Broadworks Thin Client. Again, fully integrated, nothing to do, just copy and paste your Screen Pop URL from Studio into your Thin Client and you're done. Cisco Spark, I talked about earlier, is obviously powered by Cisco Spark under the hood. Payments, there are literally hundreds of payments gateways out there today. Some of the more popular ones are people like eWay and Merchant Warrior. These are fully supported in Studio now. You just go and sign up for a Merchant Warrior account, put in your credentials within your merchant profile, your payment profile, and you can get up and going with telephone payments in a matter of minutes, and we'll actually show a demonstration of that in a second. We talked earlier about biometrics verification. There's that node, is powered by the ArmorVox engine. ArmorVox being a voice biometric engine. It's been around for quite some time. We evaluated a whole range of them in the market, and what we do is we go and pick what we believe are best of breed and put them onto our platform. And then a few that are coming soon. Recordings are obviously already available in Studio, but transcription and sentiment analysis is not, and that's coming out in the next version and will be powered by VoiceBase. VoiceBase is a San Francisco-based company that's been growing very quickly, and we're really impressed with their technology, and we'll be bringing it into Studio. And similarly, SMS, particularly in the form of outbound SMS and inbound SMS interactions, so being able to have an SMS trigger a Studio call flow or Studio flow, as opposed to just a phone call triggering a Studio call flow, will be available in the next version of Studio in January, and that's going to be powered by the Tropo UCaaS platform. So for many of our service providers, they don't operate a mobile network, they don't have their own SMS gateways. We can basically just make use of some of those platforms out there that make these widely available and put, again, that graphical abstraction layer over the top of it to make them really easy to use. Okay, so look for that in the first quarter of next year as well. Speaking of next year, so in Q1, as I just mentioned, full support for SMS scripts powered by Tropo, full WebRTC support. So if you have customers that are looking for WebRTC IVR, you'll be able to offer them that. You'll be able to publish URLs that they can use to interact with your Studio scripts, and you'll be able to use the same purchasing model that you already do, so session pooling and a session-based model, supporting both your regular telephone calls and your WebRTC calls. Inference React, I talked about a lot more. We are very excited about this. It's obviously powered by Broadworks XSI, and if you are a service provider that are looking to trial it with customers or trial it for your own internal purposes, let us know, and we can make it freely available for a period of time for you to try that out. And there'll be separate webinars on Inference React, so watch for those. And in Q2, we talk about call recording and voice transcription, again, powered by VoiceBase. And then Q3 is pretty wide open. And this is where we're in the planning phases right now. So if you have a particular requirement or a particular technology that you would like to see in Studio, let us know, and we'll work hard to try and make sure that that comes into the product roadmap in the not too distant future. What I want to do now is just end with a couple of different demonstrations. These are going to be very quick demonstrations, just showing you how easy it is to get started with some of these complicated technologies. The first one is voice biometrics, and the second one is PCI payments. Now, in the case of voice biometrics, it's not too much of a stretch to say that just last year, for example, it would have taken hundreds of thousands of dollars to get up and running with biometrics, because these were typically very big projects. You would need specific licenses, specific servers, You would obviously need a project plan around how you were going to implement it and roll it out. Now you can literally try biometrics on Studio and have something that you have built on your network up and running in under 5 minutes. And I'm going to show you that now. And then the second one obviously is payments, and I'll show you that quickly as well. So let's switch out to the interface again. I'm going to go back to the script view in Studio. And the first thing I'm going to do is go and create a new script. I'm going to call it Let's Try Biometrics. And this is a demo that I'm doing. And I'm going to do it in US English with Rebecca as the voice. And I'm going to click on Add. And this is creating for me the new placeholder. There it is, Let's Try Biometrics. I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to actually use the templates. And I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of newer templates that have been added to each account this year, and a couple of those relate to biometrics. So if I just filter on bio, you can see Inference Biometrics Enrollment and Inference Biometrics Verification. So in order to implement biometrics, you need to obviously have an enrollment process and a verification process. So in enrollment, we're going to capture a voice print, and verification, we're going to test an utterance against a voice print to see who it is. So let's do an enrollment process. Click on Continue. Wait a few seconds, and that's it. It's built on the cloud platform and it's connected to your network pretty much instantly. So if I just mouse over this little node here, it's going to tell me how this works. It says this is the biometric enrollment template. Each user is required to have a unique identifier. The identifier is then associated with the voice print. In this case, we use a 4-digit employee ID. It's going to play a little introduction message to the caller, and that's where it's now going to capture the ID. So if we wanted to change that to something else, we could change this form to be whatever we like. Some more instructions will be provided, and then we're going to go through an enrollment process. Okay, so enrollments in biometrics are actually pretty straightforward in Studio. You basically need to capture 3 utterances of somebody speaking the same phrase. Quite often it's their name or their customer number or something like that. And you provide 3 prompts that actually describe that. So the first one here is please say your name and then press the hash key. Or the pound key, depending on whether you're ringing this in Asia or in Australia, or the US. And the second prompt would be, we've captured your first utterance, there are 2 remaining, please say your name again and then press the pound key. And then finally the third one would be, we have captured your second utterance, please say your name one more time and then press the pound key. And of course you can change this to be whatever you want it to be. Okay. We then store that print into the cloud database that's part of Studio, and let you know that it's been storing, and then we go through a testing process where we actually test the print that we just created and so on. But again, all of this is just provided in the template. Okay, so if you get a good quality check, if you get an unsure or you get something else, you can go down different branches and so on. Now, the only thing I need to do to get this live on the network is to assign a phone number to it. Okay, so you can see I've currently got 1 service number available. I'm just going to go over to the action menu, map a number, and assign that 1 number that I've got, and we're now live. So literally we can be trying biometrics straight away by ringing that number. Okay, simple as that. All right, I'm going to unmap that number now, put in my password, and free that number up. Now it's unallocated again. Now the second demonstration I want to show is PCR payments. Okay, so we're going to use the new payment node, which came out in Studio 4.0, which was about the middle of the year. And the way you use payments in Studio is to also have a payment, what's called a payment gateway profile. So if I look on the payment gateway profile, you can see I've got 2 profiles here at the moment. One's called Test Profile, the other one's called Merchant Warrior. If I wanted to add a new payment profile, I could just go up here and click on the plus button, and I could actually pick any of the gateways. So let's pick Merchant Warrior, and then I'd go through and I'd pick my currency, I'd set my mode to either test or live, and then I'd provide the information that the payment gateway provider has given me when I signed up for an account. So this is a thing called a merchant UUID, an API key, and an API passphrase, or pass. And that's it, simple as that. Once I've got that up and running, or once I've got that set up, I can then go in and use that within my actual application. So I've created another script here, and I did this just before the webinar started, which I've called Let's Try Payments. And you can see how simple it is. There's only a very small number of nodes in here. Now this is just indicative of what you would build in Studio. In an actual implementation, you'd probably have a bit more to it. But in this case, we're going to have an amount that we want to pay over the telephone, and then we're going to go straight into the payment node. Okay. And again, the payment node is pretty straightforward as well. So we have this concept of payment details, where we specify the gateway. We specify the name of the caller that we're going to use. In this case, I'm using their phone number, the amount that they want to pay, and whether there's a CVC number that you need to collect. And then we're going to provide prompts for how to enter their card number, their expiry, their CVC, and so on. And the gateway is going to be sent all of those details in an approved PCI manner and come back with some codes. In this case, a number of different codes: response code, response message, transaction ID, and status. And then we just look at the results and react accordingly. And again, that's all you need to get up and running with payments. So you can build a payment system, again, in under 5 minutes. Now, just like with biometrics, with the payments, there will be another webinar just on payments. So look for that if that's something that you or your customers are interested in. Now, there are a few questions here, so I'm just going to go through those questions before we end the session today. One of the questions is, how easy is it to add another gateway? It's a great question. As I said, I think earlier, there are hundreds of gateways out there today, and depending on which part of the world your customer base resides, you might have a preference for one gateway or another. And so, yes, we are routinely adding gateways, payment gateways, to the respective Studio instances, depending on where they're physically residing. We've even done custom gateway implementations where people like federal government customers or state government customers, for example, have an internal payment gateway that they maintain. We've supported those sorts of gateways as well. So if you have a particular gateway in mind, let us know and we will add it into the next Studio release. It is not a very big task to do that. The next question is about PCI compliance and whether it is global or not. So yes, so the actual architecture itself is PCI compliant. So what we do here is we work with specific data centers that are part of our own compliance, and then within those data centers we have our own architecture that is approved and segmented in a way that allows it to maintain PCI level 1 compliance. So any data center or any point of presence that we roll out will be PCI level 1 compliant. Okay. And the last question is timing on Studio 4.2. So the exact date will need to be agreed with the carrier community. So we have several dozen carriers now that resell Inference Studio in various parts of the world. And it was most likely, it's earmarked for late January. So whether it becomes late January or early February will come down to the agreed change windows, but yeah, look for it in that time frame. The US deployment of Studio 4.1 only happened a week ago, so that makes it sort of mid to late October. So yes, you can see the frequency of releases that we have. Every few months there's a new release coming out. Okay, so that looks like it for questions. I think what we'll do then is we'll close this webinar out now. Now, just a reminder that Inference will be presenting and exhibiting at BroadSoft Connections, which is the big BroadSoft show coming up in San Antonio in a few weeks' time. So if you are going to be at that show, or representatives from your company are going to be at that show, please reach out to us. We can either meet on the show floor or happy to meet separately as well if there's specific requirements that you'd like to discuss. And also, please look out for the upcoming webinars that we have on PCI payments, on biometrics, on React, and a number of other things. We have a relatively full webinar schedule because we find it's a good way to communicate with our service provider customers. And in fact, if you have end customers that would like to come to these webinars, feel free to invite them as well. Okay, so thank you for your time today, everyone, and look forward to talking to you and meeting you soon. Bye for now.